It didn't happen in public. No cameras, no announcement. Just a name quietly struck from a list, and a queen left standing outside a door she once walked through without question. When Princess Anne intervened, the message was unmistakable. This was no longer her space. And the one being shut out was Queen Camilla. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What unfolded in those quiet corridors wasn't chaos, it was control, precise and deliberate, the kind that doesn't shout but echoes. Reports suggest the Royal Family Council had been summoned under unusual urgency, a gathering reserved only for moments when the very foundation of the monarchy feels uncertain. Camilla, by all expectations, was meant to be there, her position as queen consort practically guaranteeing her seat. But something shifted in the final hours. Insiders whisper that a last-minute directive altered everything, security lists revised, access quietly restricted, and long-standing protocol suddenly redefined. It is now whispered in the highest echelons of palace administration that Anne did not act impulsively. This was not emotion, this was enforcement. The kind rooted in decades of unwavering loyalty to the institution, not the individuals within it. Those familiar with the monarchy's internal rhythms describe it as deeply unsettling, because such moves are rarely visible and even more rarely challenged. Yet here it was a silent but undeniable line being drawn. Various interpretations of the moment suggest Camilla wasn't publicly confronted, nor openly dismissed, but the message was delivered through absence, through a door that simply did not open for her. Palace aides, usually composed and discreet, reportedly struggled to maintain normalcy, their routines disrupted by an unspoken awareness that something irreversible had just taken place. And while no official statement acknowledged it, the atmosphere shifted instantly, as though the monarchy itself had recalibrated its balance. The council continued without her, decisions made behind closed doors that she could no longer influence. And in that silence, a deeper question began to take shape: who decides who belongs in the room where power is defined? Because this wasn't just about a single meeting or a temporary exclusion. It carried the weight of something far more significant, something that had been quietly building, layer by layer, beneath formal appearances and public unity. A fracture not yet visible to the world, but impossible to ignore for those standing within it. And as the doors remained closed and the conversations continued without interruption, one truth became increasingly difficult to dismiss: this moment wasn't accidental, and it certainly wasn't temporary. It was the beginning of something far more calculated, far more strategic, and far more consequential than anyone outside those walls could fully understand. But this wasn't just about a meeting, it was about control, and a power shift that had been building behind palace walls for months. For decades, the Royal Family Council operated in silence, its decisions shaping the monarchy's future without interference. But this time, something was different. The agenda was guarded, the guest list restricted, and one absence would speak louder than any decision made inside that room. What had once been a quiet, almost sacred mechanism of royal governance was now under a level of scrutiny it had never faced before, not from the outside world, but from within its own walls. Insiders suggest that this council, often described as the unseen engine behind the monarchy's most critical decisions, was never meant to be questioned. It functioned on trust, hierarchy, and an unspoken understanding of who belonged and who did not. And yet, this particular gathering disrupted that order in a way that could not be ignored. Traditionally, figures like Queen Camilla would have been present without debate, her role securing her place among the most senior voices. But this time, her absence wasn't incidental, it was deliberate, precise, and impossible to overlook. Reports suggest the topics discussed went far beyond routine matters, touching on issues tied to succession, authority, and the fragile balance of legacy that defines the monarchy's future. There were whispers of documents reviewed, decisions reconsidered, and alliances quietly tested. Those familiar with the inner workings of the palace describe an atmosphere unlike anything seen in recent years, tense, controlled, and deeply guarded. Even the staff, typically shielded from the implications of such meetings, were reportedly instructed to limit movement, restrict communication, and ensure that nothing escaped beyond those closed doors. It is now whispered in the highest circles that the level of secrecy surrounding this council was not just precautionary, it was strategic. Something was being protected, or perhaps something was being challenged. And in that silence, the absence of one key figure became louder than any discussion taking place inside. Various interpretations of the situation suggest that this wasn't simply about excluding a single individual, but about redefining influence itself. Who gets to sit at that table? Who shapes the decisions that will echo for generations? These were no longer theoretical questions, they were being answered in real time. Behind doors that had suddenly become more guarded than ever before, the council, once a symbol of unity and continuity, now felt like a battleground where tradition and change collided in ways that could not be undone. And as those inside continued their discussions, carefully navigating the weight of every decision, those outside were left with fragments, whispers, and a growing sense that something fundamental had shifted. Because in a system built on protocol, even the smallest deviation carries meaning. And this was no small deviation. It was a signal, subtle yet undeniable, that the rules were being rewritten not publicly, not officially, but in the only place that truly mattered. And as the doors closed, one question echoed through palace corridors: why was Camilla deliberately kept out? The tension didn't begin that day. It had been simmering, quiet disagreements, subtle defiance, and decisions that didn't align. What appeared as protocol on the surface was, in reality, a growing divide between two forces within the monarchy. Long before that council door closed without Queen Camilla on the other side, something deeper had already taken root, something that couldn't be resolved with formalities or polite silence. Reports suggest the differences between Camilla and Princess Anne were never loud, never explosive, but they were persistent, woven into the fabric of daily decisions and quiet exchanges. It is now whispered in palace circles that these tensions centered on influence: who had it, who was gaining it, and who believed it was being exercised too freely. Camilla's role, increasingly visible in internal matters, began to stretch beyond what some considered traditional boundaries, and while it was never openly challenged, it did not go unnoticed. Those familiar with the monarchy's internal structure describe Anne as immovable when it comes to protocol, someone who doesn't adapt to shifting dynamics, but instead reinforces the original framework with even greater precision. And so, what emerged was not a confrontation, but a contrast: one figure expanding her presence, the other tightening the rules that defined it. Insiders whisper that this contrast created a silent friction, one that palace staff could feel even when nothing was said outright. Conversations became more measured, decisions carried an unspoken weight, and moments that once passed without scrutiny began to linger, as though everyone sensed that something larger was unfolding beneath the surface. Various interpretations suggest that Camilla's increasing involvement was seen by some as necessary, even natural, while others viewed it as a quiet overreach, a shift that risked altering the balance of influence within the royal structure. But Anne's response was never reactive, it was observational, patient, and calculated. Those close to the situation claim she was watching, assessing, waiting for the moment when action would no longer be avoidable. And that is where the tension became something more than disagreement. It became positioning. Lines, though never formally drawn, began to take shape in subtle ways through decisions, through access, through who was included and who was not. The monarchy, built on unity and continuity, now carried the weight of an internal divide that few could fully articulate but many could feel. And as these undercurrents continued to build, the illusion of harmony remained intact to the outside world, even as it quietly eroded from within. Because in a system where power is rarely spoken of directly, It is often revealed through the smallest shifts, the decisions that seem routine but carry consequences far beyond their surface. And in this case, those consequences were approaching faster than anyone was willing to admit, setting the stage for a moment that would force everything into the open. But the real turning point came when a decision was made, one that forced Anne to act. It wasn't a single moment, it was a calculated move. A decision made behind closed doors, backed by quiet authority, and executed with precision. When Anne stepped in, it wasn't personal, it was strategic, and it changed everything. What had been building beneath the surface finally found its expression not through confrontation, but through control, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself, because its impact is immediate and undeniable. Reports suggest that Princess Anne had been quietly reviewing the structure of the Royal Family Council long before that meeting ever took place, examining not just its function, but the boundaries that defined who held influence within it. It is now whispered in palace circles that concerns had been raised about how those boundaries were being tested, particularly in relation to Queen Camilla and her increasingly visible role in internal matters. Various interpretations of the situation suggest that what some saw as natural involvement, others viewed as a gradual shift away from established tradition, a shift that, left unchecked, could alter the balance of authority in ways that were difficult to reverse. Those familiar with the monarchy's internal dynamics describe Anne's approach as deliberate and unwavering, someone who does not respond to pressure, but instead reinforces structure with clarity and resolve. And so, when the moment came, it did not unfold as a reaction, but as a decision already made. Insiders whisper that stricter attendance protocols were introduced with little warning, transforming what had once been understood into something explicitly defined. Access was no longer assumed, it was granted, controlled, and when necessary, withheld. Staff were reportedly instructed to follow these new directives without question, reinforcing a shift that was both procedural and symbolic. It is now believed that Camilla was informed not through direct confrontation, but through the quiet execution of these changes, a method that ensured the message was received without the need for explanation. Those close to the situation describe it as a controlled intervention, one that avoided public conflict while delivering a clear and irreversible outcome. The council meeting proceeded, but under a new framework, one that reflected not just a decision about attendance, but a broader assertion of authority. And within that framework, every action carried weight, every adjustment signaling something deeper than its immediate purpose. Because this wasn't about a single seat at a table, it was about redefining the rules that determined who could claim that seat in the first place. The monarchy, often perceived as unchanging, was quietly recalibrating itself, adjusting its internal balance in ways that were not visible to the outside world, but deeply felt by those within it. And as this recalibration took hold, the implications extended far beyond that one meeting, reshaping perceptions of influence, control, and legitimacy. Because when decisions like this are made, they do more than resolve immediate tensions, they establish precedent, setting the tone for everything that follows. And in this case, that tone was unmistakable, carrying a clarity that left little room for interpretation. But blocking Camilla wasn't just about enforcing rules, it sent a message to everyone watching. The silence after the meeting was louder than any confrontation. No statements, no denials, just a shift subtle but undeniable. And within the palace, everyone felt it. What lingered in the aftermath wasn't confusion, it was awareness, a quiet, heavy understanding that something fundamental had just taken place, something that could not be undone simply by returning to routine. Reports suggest that Queen Camilla did not challenge the moment publicly, nor did she attempt to force her way back into the narrative. Instead, those close to the inner circle describe her reaction as composed, controlled, yet deeply significant. It wasn't about what she said, it was about what she chose not to say. And in a system where every gesture carries meaning, that restraint created an atmosphere that felt more charged than any direct confrontation ever could. Insiders whisper that her absence from the council did not go unnoticed among senior staff, many of whom had long operated under a clear and stable hierarchy. That stability, even if only slightly disrupted, created uncertainty that spread quickly through the ranks. Conversations became guarded, decisions felt heavier, and the simple act of moving through daily routines now carried an undercurrent of tension that no one could ignore. Those familiar with the situation suggest that loyalties, once assumed, were now being quietly reassessed. Some aligned themselves more closely with figures like Princess Anne, whose commitment to structure and protocol appeared stronger than ever, while others remained cautious, unwilling to step too far in any direction until the full implications became clear. And as this internal uncertainty grew, it began to ripple outward. Media circles, often attuned to the slightest shifts within the monarchy, picked up on the absence, the silence, the lack of clarification. Speculation followed quickly, fueled not by confirmed details, but by the absence of denial. Royal watchers began to question what had changed, not just in terms of one meeting, but in the broader balance of power that defines the institution. Various interpretations emerged, each attempting to make sense of a moment that felt both subtle and seismic at the same time. Some viewed it as a reinforcement of tradition, others as a strategic repositioning, but all agreed on one thing: this was not routine, this was not temporary. Something had shifted, and it was being felt at every level of the monarchy. And as that realization settled in, both inside the palace and beyond its walls, it became increasingly difficult to dismiss the significance of what had just occurred. Because in a structure built on continuity, even the smallest change can signal something far greater. And this was no small change. It was a moment that redefined expectations, challenged assumptions, and quietly reshaped the narrative of influence itself. And at the center of it all stood one question: who truly holds power inside the monarchy now? In moments of uncertainty, the monarchy has always relied on its strongest defenders, the ones who act not for influence, but for preservation. And in this moment, Anne didn't stand alone. What unfolded behind those guarded doors was not the decision of one individual, but the quiet alignment of a mindset that has existed within the institution for generations, a belief that the monarchy must be protected, not from the outside, but from within. Reports suggest that Princess Anne has long been viewed as one of the most steadfast figures in maintaining royal tradition, someone who does not bend under pressure or adapt to shifting expectations, but instead reinforces the original structure with unwavering clarity. And in this instance, her actions appeared to reflect more than personal conviction. They carried the weight of a broader understanding, shared among certain senior figures within the royal circle. Insiders whisper that there were others, not publicly named but quietly present in influence, who supported the reinforcement of boundaries that had begun to blur. It is now believed that this moment marked not just an individual intervention, but a collective acknowledgement that the balance of power required recalibration. Figures associated with long-standing duty, those who prioritize the institution above personal position, are said to have recognized the significance of what was unfolding and in their own measured ways aligned with it. This wasn't about opposition, it was about preservation. The monarchy, often described as an unbroken line of continuity, depends on its ability to maintain structure even as circumstances evolve. And when that structure feels threatened, even subtly, those entrusted with its care tend to act with precision rather than hesitation. Various interpretations of the situation suggest that this alignment was not formalized, not openly declared, but understood a shared commitment to reinforcing hierarchy and ensuring that influence remains anchored in tradition rather than personal expansion. The emphasis, according to those familiar with the internal dynamics, was clear: duty must outweigh individual ambition, and the integrity of the institution must remain intact, regardless of the discomfort it may cause. Historical parallels have begun to surface in discussions surrounding this moment, comparisons to past instances where the monarchy faced internal shifts that required decisive action to preserve its identity. And while the details differ, the underlying principle remains consistent: the institution endures because those within it are willing to act when necessary, even when such actions are not publicly understood. The narrative that has quietly emerged from this situation is not one of conflict, but of protection, a reaffirmation that the monarchy is not guided solely by titles or positions, but by a deeper responsibility to maintain its continuity. And as this narrative takes shape, it becomes increasingly clear that what happened was not an isolated decision, but part of a larger pattern, one that defines how power is managed and preserved within the royal framework. Because in moments like this, the monarchy does not fracture, it fortifies itself, drawing strength from those who prioritize its survival above all else. But even the strongest guardians cannot act without consequence, and this decision would ripple far beyond one meeting. What happened behind those doors wasn't just a single act, it was a signal, a warning that the balance within the monarchy was shifting, and that not everyone would move forward together. The moment Queen Camilla was kept outside that council room did not end when the meeting concluded, it lingered, expanding into something far more consequential, something that began to reshape the narrative from within. Reports suggest that what followed was not immediate upheaval, but a gradual realization spreading through palace corridors, through staff conversations, through the quiet exchanges that often reveal more than official statements ever could. The monarchy, long defined by continuity and carefully maintained stability, now carried the weight of a subtle but undeniable shift. Insiders whisper that discussions of internal restructuring had already begun before that meeting took place. But what happened that day accelerated everything, turning quiet considerations into active reassessment. It is now believed that questions surrounding influence, access, and authority were no longer theoretical, they were being confronted in real time, with implications that extended far beyond a single individual. For Camilla, this moment introduced a new layer of uncertainty, one that could not be addressed through position alone. Various interpretations suggest that her future role, while still publicly secure, was now being viewed through a different lens, one shaped by recent events and the signals they sent. And as this perception began to take hold, it didn't remain confined within palace walls. Media attention intensified, not through confirmed revelations, but through the growing sense that something fundamental had changed. Royal watchers, often attuned to even the smallest shifts, began to question the long-term implications, analyzing not just what had happened, but what it might mean moving forward. Those familiar with the situation describe an atmosphere where certainty had been replaced by anticipation, where every decision, every appearance, every absence carried new significance. Insiders hint that this moment may not be isolated, that it could be part of a broader sequence of changes designed to reinforce structure and redefine influence within the monarchy. And while nothing has been formally announced, the pattern, according to those observing closely, suggests that more adjustments may follow, quiet, controlled, and just as impactful. The broader implications extend beyond individual roles, touching on the very nature of leadership within the royal institution. Who shapes its direction? Who safeguards its legacy? And how are those responsibilities distributed in a time of transition? These are no longer distant considerations, they are active questions, unfolding in real time as the monarchy navigates a period of quiet transformation. Because in moments like this, the institution does not simply react, it evolves, adapting to internal pressures while maintaining its outward composure. And as that evolution continues, the sense of a defining moment becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. The monarchy is not unraveling, but it is changing, and that change carries with it both uncertainty and inevitability. And as the dust begins to settle, one final question remains: was this the beginning of a new order? No announcement will ever confirm it. No statement will fully explain it. But those who understand the monarchy know, when a door closes like that, it never reopens the same way again. What happened in that moment did not end when the meeting adjourned. It settled into the structure itself, quietly reshaping expectations and redefining the limits of influence in ways that will echo long after the details are forgotten. Reports suggest that Princess Anne's decision did more than block access, it introduced a new framework, one where authority is not assumed but measured, where presence is no longer guaranteed by title alone, And in that shift, the balance began to tilt. For Queen Camilla, the impact was not immediate or openly acknowledged, but those familiar with palace dynamics describe it as a subtle recalibration, one that placed her position under a different kind of scrutiny. It is now whispered that influence within the monarchy is no longer defined by proximity alone, but by alignment with a deeper, more rigid interpretation of duty and tradition. And that interpretation, reinforced in silence, carries consequences that cannot be easily reversed. Insiders suggest that roles within the senior royal circle are already being reconsidered, not through formal declarations, but through quiet adjustments: who is consulted, who is present, who is trusted with decisions that shape the future. These changes, though not publicly visible, create a ripple effect that touches every level of the institution, redefining relationships and expectations in ways that are both subtle and profound. Various interpretations of this moment point to a broader principle at work, one that places the institution above the individual, reinforcing the idea that the monarchy survives not by adapting to personal ambitions, but by maintaining the integrity of its structure. And in that context, Anne's intervention is seen not as an isolated act, but as part of a larger effort to preserve that integrity, even at the cost of internal tension. The legacy of this decision, according to those observing closely, will not be measured in immediate outcomes, but in the long-term stability it seeks to protect. Because when the monarchy shifts, it does so carefully, deliberately, ensuring that each adjustment strengthens rather than weakens its foundation. Yet even within that controlled transformation, a sense of unresolved tension remains. The silence that followed the meeting has not fully lifted. It lingers, shaping interactions, influencing decisions, and reminding those within the system that something fundamental has changed. The monarchy moves forward, as it always does, but not unchanged. It carries with it the imprint of that moment, a quiet reminder that power, once redefined, rarely returns to its previous form. And as this new dynamic settles into place, the future remains uncertain, shaped by decisions that may never be publicly explained, but will be deeply felt by those who understand their significance. Because in the monarchy, power isn't always declared, it's enforced in silence, and remembered forever. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.